Dracula, Chapter 14, pages 207 to 229. Mina Harker's Journal. September 23rd. Jonathan is better after a bad night. I am glad that he is so busy at the office, for that keeps his mind occupied. He will be home quite late tonight. My household work is done, so I shall take his travel journal and lock myself up in my room and read it. September 24th. I didn't have the heart to write last night. Jonathan's notebook upset me so. Poor man! Whether it is real or imagined, how he must have suffered. I wonder if there is any truth in it at all. Was he ill from the beginning? And is that why he wrote all those terrible things? Or did something happen to begin this train of thought? It cannot be true. And yet that man we saw yesterday. Jonathan seemed so certain about him. I suppose the funeral upset him and started him thinking about those awful days. One thing is certain, he believes it all himself. On our wedding day, I remember how he said, "Read it if you want to, but don't tell me what is in it unless the day comes that you have no other choice." I don't know what to make of any of it, but when I read of that fearful Count and his plans to come to London, the day may come when I have no choice. If that hour comes, I must be prepared. I shall get my typewriter out today and begin translating the shorthand. Then the story can be ready for others to read if necessary. That way I can provide it to others and not worry or upset Jonathan at all. Letter from Van Helsing to Mina Harker. September 24th. Dear Madam, please forgive this letter from a stranger. In fact, I am not quite a stranger, as it was I who sent you the sad news of Miss Lucy Westenra's death. By permission of her fiancé, Lord Godalming, you knew him as Arthur Holmwood, I have read her letters and papers, for I am deeply concerned about certain matters. In them I find some letters from you, which show how great friends you were and how you love her. Madam Mina, in the name of that love, I beg you to help me. May I come to see you? You can trust me. I am a friend of Dr. John Seward as well as of Lord Godalming, and if you will agree to see me, I shall come to Exeter at once. Again, please forgive this intrusion, madam. I have read your letters to poor Lucy, and I know how good you are, and how your husband has suffered. So I ask you, if it is possible, do not speak to him of my coming, in case it may harm him. Abraham Van Helsing. Telegram from Mrs. Harker to Van Helsing, September 25th. Come today by 10:15 train if you can catch it. Can see you any time after that. Wilhelmina Harker. Mina Harker's Journal, September 25th. I am excited about this visit of Dr. Van Helsing, for somehow I think it might help explain Jonathan's experience. And if he took care of Lucy in her last illness, he can tell me all about her. But of course that is why he is coming, to talk about Lucy and her sleepwalking, not about Jonathan. How silly I am! That dreadful journal gets hold of my imagination and colors all my thoughts. That awful night on the cliff must have somehow made Lucy ill, and Dr. Van Helsing wants to know what I remember of it. I hope I did the right thing in not telling Mrs. Westenra about it, and that Dr. Van Helsing will not blame me. I will not even mention Jonathan's journal, unless the doctor asks about it. I'm glad I've typewritten out my own journal, so that the doctor can read for himself my account of Lucy's sleepwalking. Later. He has come and gone. Oh, what a strange meeting. It has made my head spin. Can it be all possible, or even a part of it? If I hadn't read Jonathan's journal first, I couldn't begin to believe it. Poor Jonathan, how he must have suffered. I hope this will not bring all his terror back. But it may be a comfort to him to know that his eyes and ears and brain did not deceive him, and that it is all true. But I will try to put down just what happened. I liked the doctor as soon as I saw him. He is a strongly built man, with reddish hair and big dark blue eyes. He gives the impression of comfort and great intelligence. "You must be Mrs. Harker," he said to me. I nodded, and he added, "But you were Miss Mina Murray before, and it is Mina Murray, the friend of that poor dear child Lucy Westenra, that I have come to see." I asked him how I could help him, and he began at once. I have read your letters to Miss Lucy. Forgive me, but I had to begin my investigation somewhere, and there was no one to ask. I know that you were with her at Whitby. She sometimes keeps a diary. Do not look surprised, Madam Mina. She began it after you left, in imitation of you. In it, she suggests that certain things began after the night she sleepwalked to the cliff in Whitby. So I come to ask you, of your so great kindness, to tell me all of it that you can remember. I can tell you all about it, I said. I wrote it all down at the time, and I can show it to you if you like. Oh, Madam Mina, I will be grateful. You will do me much favor. I could not resist puzzling him a bit, so I handed him the shorthand diary. He opened it, and for an instant his face fell. Then he chuckled. Oh, you clever woman, he said. Will you not help me and read it for me? I know not the shorthand. A little ashamed of myself, I took the typewritten copy and handed it to him. You are so good, he said. May I read it now? I may want to ask you some things when I am done. By all means, I said. Read it while I prepare lunch, and then we can talk a while. He settled himself in a chair and became deeply absorbed in the papers. When I came back from the kitchen, I found him walking up and down the room, his face blazing with excitement. He rushed up to me and took both my hands. Oh, Madam Mina, he said, how can I repay you? This paper is as sunshine. It opens the gate to me. I am dazed. I am dazzled with so much light. I am grateful to you, you so clever woman. Madam, he said this very solemnly, if ever Abraham Van Helsing can do anything for you or yours, you must let me know. It will be pleasure and delight if I may serve you as a friend. There are darknesses in life, and there are lights. You are one of the lights. You will have a happy life and a good life, and your husband will be blessed in you. I was almost embarrassed. But, Doctor, you praise me too much. You don't even know me. I know enough, from your letters and diary, and now from meeting you. Now tell me of your husband. Is he quite well? Is the fever gone, and is he strong and healthy? I answered, he was much better, but he has been greatly upset by Mr. Hawkins' death. You must know of that from my papers to Lucy. He nodded, and I continued. I suppose it upset him, for when we were in town on Thursday, he had a sort of shock. Another shock? So soon? That is not good. What kind of shock was it? He thought he saw someone who reminded him of terrible things, the things that led to his illness. And here, somehow, the whole thing seemed to overwhelm me. I began to cry quite helplessly, and begged Dr. Van Helsing to help Jonathan if he could. The doctor said to me with great sweetness, I will be so happy if I can be of some use to you. For your husband's suffering, yes, this is suffering that I know something about. I promise that I will gladly do all for him that I can to make him strong and well, and your life together a happy one. Now you must eat. Husband Jonathan would not like to see you so pale and unhappy. Therefore, for his sake, you must eat and smile. You have told me about Lucy, and so now we shall not talk about her any more, in case it would make you sad. I shall stay in Exeter tonight, for I want to think over what you have told me. Later I will ask you more questions, if I may. Then, too, you will tell me of Jonathan's trouble, but not yet. You must eat now. Afterward you shall tell me all. After lunch, we went back to the living room, and he said to me, And now tell me all about him. When I began, I was afraid he would think me a weak fool, and Jonathan a madman. But he was so sweet and kind, and I felt such trust in him, that I said, If you will let me, I shall give you a paper to read. It is the copy of the journal he kept in Transylvania. I don't want to tell you anything about it. You will read for yourself and judge. And then when I see you, please, you tell me what you think. I promise, he said as I gave him the papers. If I may, I shall come in the morning to see you and your husband. So he took the papers with him and went away, and I sat here thinking, I don't know what. Note from Van Helsing to Mrs. Harker, delivered by messenger, September 25th, 6 p.m. Dear Madam Mina, I have read your husband's so wonderful diary. You may sleep without doubt. Strange and terrible as it is true. I will pledge my life on it. He is a brave fellow, and let me tell you that a man who would do what he did, going down that wall and to that room not once but twice, is a man who will not be permanently injured by shock. I shall have many questions to ask him. Yours the most faithful, Abraham Van Helsing. Letter from Mrs. Harker to Van Helsing, September 25th, 6:30 p.m. My dear Dr. Van Helsing, 1,000 thanks for your kind letter. You have taken a great weight off my mind, and yet, if it is all true, what terrible things there are in the world, and what an awful thing if that monster is really in London. I will so look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Your faithful and grateful friend, Mina Harker. Jonathan Harker's Journal, September 26th. I thought I would never write in this diary again, but the time has come. When I got home last night, Mina told me of Van Helsing's visit. She showed me the doctor's letter, saying that all I wrote down was true. I feel like a new man. It was my doubts about my own sanity that were tearing me apart. But now that I know, I am not afraid, even of the Count. He has succeeded in getting to London, and it was he that I saw. He has become younger, but how? Van Helsing is the man to explain it, and hunt him down, if he is anything like what Mina says. We sat up late talking it all over. Now Mina is dressing, and I will go to the hotel to meet Dr. Van Helsing and bring him here. I think he was surprised to see me. When I came across into his room and introduced myself, he took me by the shoulder, turned my face to the light, looked at me sharply, and said, "But Madame Mina told me you were ill, that you had had a shock." I smiled and said, "I was ill. I have had a shock, but you have cured me already." "And how?" "By your letter to Mina last night. I did not know what to believe, even what I myself saw or heard. Now you have given me back my faith in myself, and I am quite well again." He seemed pleased and began praising Mina to the skies. I could only agree with every word he said. He ended by saying, "And you, sir, I have read all the letters to poor Miss Lucy, and some of them speak of you, so I feel I know you already. You will give me your hand, will you not? And let us be friends for all our lives." We shook hands, and he was so earnest and so kind that I felt quite choked up. "And now," he said, "may I ask you for some more help? I have a great job to do, and the more information I have at hand, the better. Can you give me details of the business that took you to Transylvania?" "I can," I said. "I shall give you the bundle of papers, and you can read them on the train." After breakfast I took him to the station, and when we were parting he said, "If I need you and Madame Mina in London, will you come?" "We shall both come whenever you ask," I promised. I had picked up copies of the local and London newspapers, and while we were waiting for the train to start, he was glancing through them. His eyes suddenly seemed to catch something in one of them, the Westminster Gazette, and he grew quite white. He read intently, groaning to himself, "My God, so soon, so soon." I think he forgot I was standing there. Just then the whistle blew, and the train moved off. This brought him back to himself, and he waved his hands, calling out, "Love to Madame Mina. I shall write as soon as I can." Dr. Seward's Diary, September 26th. Truly there is no such thing as finality. It hasn't been a week since I said I was closing my diary forever, and yet here I am, starting fresh again, or rather, going on with the same story. Until this afternoon, I was concentrating on forgetting all that has happened. Renfield seemed as sane as he ever has. I had a letter from Arthur written on Sunday, and he seemed to be doing well enough. Quincy Morris is with him, and that is a great help, for he would cheer anyone up. As for myself, I was settling down to my work with my old enthusiasm. This wound which poor Lucy left on me was beginning to heal. It is now, however, torn wide open again, and God knows how this will all end. Van Helsing went to Exeter yesterday and stayed the night. Today he came back and almost bounded into the room, thrusting last night's Westminster Gazette into my hand. "What do you think of that?" he asked, as he stood back and folded his arms. I did not know what he meant, but he took it from me and pointed out a paragraph about children being lured away at Hampstead. It did not mean much to me until it mentioned small puncture wounds on their throats. I looked up. "Well," he said. It is like poor Lucy's." "And what do you make of it?" he demanded. "Whatever injured her has injured them." "That is true indirectly, but not directly." "How do you mean, Professor?" I asked. I wanted to take this conversation lightly, for 4 days of rest and freedom from burning anxiety has helped me restore my spirits. But when I saw his face, my smile died away. Never, even in the worst of our despair about poor Lucy, had he looked more stern. "Tell me," I insisted. "I have no opinion. I don't know what to think. I don't have enough information to think anything." "Do you mean to tell me, John, that you still have no suspicion as to what poor Lucy died of?" "Of organ failure, followed by a great loss of blood," I answered automatically. "And how was the blood lost?" he asked. I shook my head. He sat down beside me and went on. "You are a clever man, friend John. You reason well, and you have great intelligence, but you are too narrow-minded. You do not let yourself believe the evidence of your own eyes and ears. Don't you think that there are things which you cannot understand, but which do exist? Do you believe, say, in hypnotism?" "Certainly," I said. "That has been well proven." "And yet do we understand it?" "We do not." "Do you believe there are people who can read your thoughts?" "Of course not," I sputtered. Why, tell me, for I am a student of the mind, how you accept hypnotism and reject mind-reading." "Let me tell you, my friend, that there are things done today in electrical science by men who not so long ago would have been burned as wizards. There are many mysteries in life. Why was it that Methuselah lived 900 years, and that one man in France lived to 169, and yet that poor Lucy, with 4 men's blood in her poor veins, could not live even 1 day? Can you tell me why in South America there are bats that come out at night and open the veins of cattle and horses and suck their veins dry? Or how in some islands there are bats which hang in trees all day, and on hot nights, when the sailors sleep on the deck, the bats flit down on them, and in the morning the men are found dead, white as even Miss Lucy was." "Good God, Professor," he said. "Do you mean that Lucy was bitten by such a bat? That such a thing is here in London in the 19th century?" He waved his hands for silence and went on. "Can you tell me why the tortoise lives for generations of men? Why the elephant goes on and on? Can you tell me why, in all lands, in all ages, people have believed in men and women who cannot die? There have been toads, living toads, shut up in rocks for thousands of years. There are Indian holy men who can themselves die and be buried, and their graves sealed, and corn planted on them, and the corn is harvested, and planted again, and harvested a 3rd time, and then men come and open the grave, and there lies the holy man not dead, who rises up and walks among them as before." Here I interrupted him. I was getting bewildered. "But what does it all add up to? What are you trying to teach me?" "I want you to believe," he answered me. "To believe what?" "To believe in things that you are not prepared to believe. It is the first step. Now think again. You believe that those small holes in the children's throats were made by the same creature that made the holes in Miss Lucy?" "I suppose so," I agreed. He stood up and said solemnly, "Then you are wrong. It is worse, far, far worse." "In God's name, Van Helsing, what do you mean?" I cried. He threw himself into a chair, covering his face with his hands as he spoke. "They were made by Miss Lucy." Chapter 15. Dr. Seward's Diary continued. Anger boiled through me. It was as if he had struck the living Lucy on the face. I hit the table with my fist and shouted, "Dr. Van Helsing, are you mad?" He raised his head and looked at me, and somehow the tenderness on his face calmed me at once. "I wish I were," he said. "Madness would be easier to bear than truth like this. Oh, my friend, why have I taken so long to tell you? Do I hate you? Do I wish to give you pain?" "No," I murmured. "Forgive me." He went on. "My friend, it was because I wanted to break it to you gently, for I know you loved that sweet lady. But even now I do not expect you to believe. Tonight, though, I will prove it to you. Do you dare to come with me?" This staggered me. I did not want to see such a thing proven. "Come. I tell you what I want to do," he continued. "First, we go and see that child in the hospital. Dr. Vincent, who is attending him, is a friend of mine. He will let 2 scientists see this case. We shall tell him nothing, but only that we wish to learn. And then—" "And then?" He took a key from his pocket and held it up. "And then we spend the night, you and I, in the churchyard where Lucy lies. This is the key to her tomb." My heart sank, but I agreed to go with him. The child was awake when we arrived. He had slept and eaten and was doing well. Dr. Vincent took the bandage from his throat and showed us the punctures. No mistake, they were almost identical to Lucy's wounds. They were smaller, and the edges looked fresher, but that was all. Dr. Vincent said the child had been quite cheerful. When he woke up, he had immediately asked if he could go play with the beautiful lady again. Our visit to the hospital took longer than we had expected, and the sun had set before we came out. When Dr. Van Helsing saw how dark it was, he said, "There is no hurry. It is later than I thought. Come, let us find something to eat, and then we will be on our way." We ate at a restaurant with a cheerful, noisy crowd of bicyclists. It was about 10 o'clock when we left, and very dark. As we walked along, we met fewer and fewer people, until at last we reached the wall of the churchyard, where we climbed over. It took us a while to find the West End tomb in the dark. The professor took the key, opened the creaky door, and standing back, politely motioned me to enter first. I had to choke back a hysterical laugh at his good manners on such an awful occasion. We lit a candle. In the daytime, even filled with flowers, the tomb had looked awful enough. But now, with the hot flowers hanging limp and dead, their whites turning to rust color, and their greens to browns, and spiders and beetles scurrying everywhere, it was a miserable place. Van Helsing went straight to work. Holding his candle so that he could read the coffin nameplates, he quickly located Lucy's. He pulled a screwdriver from his bag. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "Open the coffin. I will convince you yet." He quickly began taking out the screws, and finally lifted off the lid, showing the inner case of lead. The sight was almost too much for me. It seemed as insulting to the dead as stripping her as she slept would have been to the living. I actually took hold of his hand to stop him. He only said, "You shall see," and again, fumbling in his bag, took out a tiny saw. Striking the screwdriver through the lead, he made a small hole just big enough to let in the point of the saw. I stepped back, expecting a rush of foul-smelling gas from the weak old corpse. But the professor never stopped for a moment. He sawed down a couple of feet along one side of the lead coffin, and then across and down the other side. Taking the loose edge, he bent it back toward the foot of the coffin. He held the candle high and motioned me to look. The coffin was empty. I stood staring, shocked into silence. Van Helsing showed no surprise whatsoever. "Are you satisfied now, John?" he asked. My stubborn nature made me answer as I did. "I am satisfied that Lucy's body is not in that coffin, but that only proves one thing." "And what is that?" "That it is not there." "That is good logic," he said, "so far as it goes. But how do you explain it not being there?" Perhaps a body snatcher, I suggested. Some undertaker's employee may have stolen it. I knew I was talking nonsense, but it was the only explanation I could come up with. The professor sighed. "Ah, well," he said, "we must have more proof. Come with me." He put on the coffin lid again, gathered up all his things, and placed them in the bag. We opened the door and went out. Then he told me to watch at one side of the graveyard while he watched the other. I sat behind a tree, and he headed out of sight in the other direction.